I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, Naturopathic Doctor. Okay, so welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. I am so grateful today to share some time and space with Dr. Michelle Peris, who's a naturopathic doctor. She's actually my neighbor in Oakville, not house neighbor, but naturopath neighbor while we're in Burlington. And we are on here chatting today. Michelle, you've created a wonderful sort of concept and program. I saw you talk about community medicine. I think it was probably a year ago. And I was blown away by this program that you've developed for the women in your clinic, so much so that now this is something that we are going to adopt in our own clinic space at Clarity Health in Burlington. So thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thanks so much for saying that. That means the world to me coming from you, Jordan. I think the world of you, so I'm honored.
Yeah, I love where you saw a big hole in the way we were able to support the women in our practice, and you went after a solution for it. Like that's brilliant to me, right? That we can identify. And I think you and I have had this conversation like many times about, we don't know who's benefiting more from a community approach to healthcare, the women or the practitioner. But I want you to tell us a little bit about, I want to hear your story, first of all, which I've heard before, but I think it's a worthy share for our listeners about how sort of this community project came to be and your backstory, because I think that's kind of an important one to share, because I think a lot of women can kind of connect with this feeling of not belonging and and loneliness and isolation, which we know are massive risk factors for poor health. So walk us through sort of how you got to this point where you developed Rebel Tribe.
Sure. And so to start, there is, this intersection of my personal life and my life as a practitioner and seeing what the needs were, and also looking at the data and understanding that there was a huge need to provide a solution for women who were lonely and needed to connect and wanting more from their healthcare experience. And so, growing up, I always found connecting very challenging. I found that it was difficult within my own family functioning with women. It was just like, I was like the weird one. It just never energetically always felt like there was something I wasn't understanding. From the women who run with wolves, she calls it the mistaken zygote. Like you just feel like this alien born into this family. So I always, move through my life with that feeling of not belonging to something. But interestingly, I could always make my needs be met. I could fit into social norms. Like I could understand what were the expectations and what I needed to do to survive, but I really craved for something deeper than that. And so through my own experience and then, finally finding my people in naturopathic medicine and feeling what belongingness felt like, that story, that transformation of that pain into empowerment was one that I wanted to take and give permission for other women to do the same. And so I started naturopathic medicine in an integrative practice here in Oakville. And when it became time to open my own clinical space, there was this huge driver to create room or the potential for community. I did feel like it was an audacious dream. I wasn't sure if that was going to fly. Because if you've ever tried to run like group detox programs or any kind of program, it's hard to get engagement from your patient population. And so I really took it from a different angle of, let's look at this of what would we want the template of every woman to know. And that comes from, being in clinical practice for 7 years and realizing that we had this robust wisdom to share, but there was just this lack of time, or there were things that we were saying in a one-on-one practice where we were repeating ourselves all day, and it wasn't utilizing our time. It was depleting. I could tell the women in my practice were craving more, but one-on-one no longer made sense. And so it was just this beautiful time where everything aligned, and I just leaned in and took a risk and tried to create something different in terms of a healthcare experience. And luckily it sold out and it soared. And since then we've sold out every time with a significant wait list. And now, we're across Canada, and I'm honored to have Rebel Tribe and clinics as incredible as yours, because that it's so meaningful. And we're actually now international. It's launching in 3 US states as well. And the premise is that we are, sisterhood and self-care. We are creating space and an opportunity for connection, because the data is so strong in, social isolation being the leading all-cause mortality more than diet and lifestyle. We need to be talking about and creating an opportunity for humans to connect in a very real fashion. That I wanted to create space for that, and then also deliver a health curriculum that I think every woman deserves to have access to, so that they can advocate for themselves, that they can be a better participant in a one-on-one visit, so that we are, leveraging our time, like you say, as a strategist to help them transform their health and use that time efficiently, all the while making sure that they have all the information that they need to make informed decisions, which I think is so important in women's health.
Oh, you said that so beautifully. I agree with you. There's so many points there that we're going to circle back to, but even just that idea that women don't have good access to education around their own health, right? And there's pockets of it, right? I'll say, if women are, weirdly fortunate enough to go through fertility assessment, they learn a lot about their body and how it works and their cycle. But women who don't go through a really highly investigative approach to their healthcare, because they're otherwise kind of well, right? They're vertical. They make it to work. they miss out on some of those key learning moments around what what even their health as a woman should look like or could look like, right? Because I think they end up settling for sort of mediocre, because we're kind of okay with that, right? Versus learning how to have their best version of themselves. I think about the story of my mom, which she'll probably be mortified for me to tell this story, but at her age, when she got her period, no one had ever talked to her about it. She didn't even know it was coming, right? And we still see glimmers of that, where we don't talk enough about women's health or miscarriage or whatnot, so that women can't make good informed decisions. And that's my whole purpose of the podcast, is to give access to information that I think should be available to all women, so that they can make good healthcare choices. But if we're not openly having conversations about it, you're right, where it's down to those one-on-one visits. And I can, in a day, 12 half-hour slots in a row, talk to women about the stressor of ovulation and how that influences how they feel. Can we just put all those women in a room, right? Because I think, we would be way more efficient with their one-on-one time to get bigger than the basics of their biology, but also how empowering for them to know that the woman before them and after them in the waiting room, we're also suffering. We're also lonely. We're also wishing that they had other women to discuss this with, and they just don't.
It's the most beautiful thing, is that you're humanizing and normalizing that experience for them. And people don't realize the power and the potential of that. Sometimes we carry these things and we think we're alone in whatever thing we're challenged by. And you have someone sit beside you and they share their story, and it's so similar to your own, but maybe their viewpoint, their lens, their ability to cope with that stress and articulate it in a different manner can thrust you through that stress or trauma of that situation almost instantaneously, which is why, community for me really is the medicine. It's really this powerful place to allow transformation, to facilitate change, and to empower women to engage with healthcare in a different way. And like my mom's story is so similar to yours. And she actually thought she was dying until 3 days later, she shared with her mom what was going on. And it was like, oh, just like, it's your period, here's some pads, like zero conversation. And so if, this is where we're coming from, often we don't know that there is any other way, that there's a possibility to think about our health in a different fashion. And so it's just such an incredible opportunity to get women who are curious to learn more and get very engaged about their healthcare journey.
So, you alluded to some of the health risks there around isolation, and we can say it, right? And I think people know deeply, at the surface level, that loneliness and isolation is a risk, right? Or that it's, not good for them, in air quotes. But you've spent time and you've talked on, documentaries about this, and like, what does the research actually say about isolation, and why should this be as important as diet, lifestyle, and all the other things?
Right. I think at the foundation of this, what we need to understand is our brain is wired for social connection. And when we understand what that means and how that works, I think then we can have a different conversation of how do we prioritize this? Our brain experiences social pain equal to physical pain. So much like you would tend to your broken arm, you must absolutely tend to your social pain, and it can be perceived. It does not mean that it actually had happened to you. If you experienced it that way, you are suffering the health consequences of that. When we look at older adults and we're understanding how social disconnectedness affects them, what we learn is that in terms of mental health, it's completely subjected on how much they feel isolated. But what is unanimous about all of these lonely individuals is that it affects their physical health regardless of their perception. So there are health ramifications when we are not socially connected to individuals. And there's just no other way to slice that. It's a reality. And so when we come at it from that lens, we can start to prioritize that. When we look at studies on ovarian cancer, there was a study done in 2012. And when we looked at women who had strong social attachment, it was associated with a 27% survival advantage. When we look at women with cardiovascular disease and they've recently had a myocardial infarction, we can prevent her risk of death the year after a heart attack by 50% if that woman has access to connection. And connection can be one other individual. And I remember speaking very passionately about that last year, is like, if we knew that stat, like, we'd be screaming it from the rooftops, telling women how pivotal this one thing is and how that can radically change their health outcome. When we look at cognitive decline, high social engagement reduced cognitive decline by 91% when a study was conducted in 2004. So these are like radical shifts in someone's healthcare with the simplicity and access to a free medicine in many ways is connection. And so I think we need to create, that clarity. We need to do a good job of screening as clinicians and see how people are truly connected to their environment, and then provide either options for them to connect in a health facility, like provide a program for them to access, or provide tools and tips as to ways to connect and prioritize that for themselves.
So, and it's interesting that like those are some of our top just killers in women in general, right? Like, so when I'm talking to women about like the benefits of hormone replacement therapy, we're talking about cognitive decline and we're talking about cardiovascular disease. We're probably not doing that great of a job on a whole of screening for isolation and loneliness, right? Where maybe that's as equal of importance as, screening for those more like biochemical causes of those conditions or diseases. So, we've talked about this before, and this is partly why I'm interested in and why we're running the Rebel Tribe in Burlington. But like what kind of, like, we use the word transformation, but we don't take, that's not flaky one bit. Like truly there's transformation that are happening in the women in your program, and they're coming back year over year to talk to new women about why, like the benefits and importance of following through with that program. What are you noticing when you're watching those women? Because I recently shared a example for our group who, you know, is on the verge of signing up for Rebel Tribe in Burlington, that, you know, the differences I noticed in my patients when I was fully leaned into their process and journey and my, you know, call it like my weird. But what transformation are you noticing in your patients, like, and the women who are part of your program?
Well, there's so many wonderful transformations that we're able to witness and experience. And so when we're talking about it from a health perspective, we've gathered some data over the years. And so we've actually been able to show like a 25% reduction in anxiety. Those who scored higher or had more severe depression upon entry of the program had significantly reduced scoring of depression scales on a Beck's inventory. We have patients who are engaged in the process. So where we felt like we were repeating ourselves time and time again about what really needed to happen in terms of, you know, having better compliance and connection to the treatment plan and doing the things, we had complete buy-in. So we were noticing so many metrics of people's health improving and getting the results that they wanted. But the beautiful thing that I think that we're able to do or be witness of is that when we normalize this experience for women, when we humanize and help women realize that they're not alone in this, they start to be brave. And those obstacles to cure that are often real barriers to true health transformation. You know, you're in a marriage that doesn't serve you. You're in a job that you're not happy about. You're continually hanging out with people who tap your energy sources. You know, those are legitimate concerns, and those are really hard obstacles, and they're definitely hard, I find, in a one-on-one visit to get, you know, to a very real level where people are able to recognize that that is something that's getting in the way of them having great health. And so putting them in a community together really made these women brave. They felt safe. They felt deeply connected to other women. So, you know, hydrating and having a challenge about that, but also realizing the importance of, you know, that PMS may be common, but not normal. What are the symptoms? What do you experience? And helping them be engaged in that process and co-create that healthcare experience and want to transform that. They also were really leveling up in their life. They were able to take brave action. They were able to conduct themselves in a way and elevate themselves to a life that was in alignment with their core values, things that they really wanted. I think a lot of women have never had the conversations of, you know, what is your mission? What's your purpose? What are we doing? What is this all for? And so when we create an opportunity and space to do that, not only can we help them have the health that they need to do that, but we can also make them braver to take action on those things. And that's, you know, we've been privy to watch women for 3 years now work through our community health initiative. And you know, those women, the way they self-advocate now in a one-on-one visit is so incredibly articulate and beautiful. They're completely self-aware and they know what they want to focus on. They still need their strategist. They still need their naturopathic doctor to see it through and to inform them. But they are completely engaged in the process and they actually understand their body a lot better. So there's huge health benefits, but there's also this beautiful bravery and life benefit that all women seem to get when they show up consistently. The results are reproducible.
And it's the coolest part is that it's not like they're necessarily sharing all of their obstacles, right? And It's not that they necessarily are putting their hand up and saying, I am in a destructive relationship, right? And I think that can be, perceived as maybe one of the fears for joining in on community because, women know what some of their health obstacles are and have worry about, do I have to disclose all of these things in order to see the benefit? The amazing part is that they don't, right? And so being part of a group where the focus is learning and discussing and goal setting and whatnot, it's not a requisite that these women lay it on the floor, but that the support that they get from the conversation and from the connection actually allows them to feel brave and do those things outside of the group, whether or not the group is even aware, right? And that's what I find like so interesting is that, and I think when we worry about joining a group, right? I use the example of like when someone says in yoga, like, okay, everyone get a partner, right? Like I would be like mortified, like, oh my God, I don't want to have to get a partner. Please don't make me get a partner. But even without necessarily divulging all of the things that are going on in your life, just being in that class actually helps you do better outside of the class, which is so cool, right? Again, you don't necessarily have to tell everybody in the group that you have terrible diarrhea, but in the group will help your diarrhea, right? Yeah. Like it'll never come up. Yeah.
You articulated that beautifully, because that is right. If that felt threatening or intimidating, we're not talking about how terrible our marriages are. That doesn't even come up. It is the bravery you take from that allows you to take action in your life with things that are not in alignment with health promotion.
Right. Yes. And it's interesting. Like when I think over my clinical practice, and this is coming into my life at a really good time, right? Because I want to be able to provide access to that transformation for women. And what I was finding is in between their appointments, they were looking for that information or that connection somewhere else, right? So they would do a diet challenge at their gym with someone who had, virtually no training in how to fuel them or support them. Or they would sign up for something at work, that was health promotional and great, but maybe not necessarily what I would want them, like the best of what I would want for them, right? As a, very evidence-based practitioner, it would pain me for them to sign up for these challenges or downloadable guides, but they were gravitating to that because they knew that they needed a little bit more support than what we were capable of doing in a 30-minute visit twice a year. So part of that is I wanted to control the education that I could deliver to women in a way that was actually accessible to them, right? To give them 20 hours of my time, but do it in a way that we're sharing and doing it together, which makes it so much more accessible. But it also comes at a point in my career where it's, I think when I first started practicing, and I had trouble fitting in too when I was growing up. I definitely was the weird kid. I still am the super weird kid. Mm-hmm. Didn't always connect great. I would let one or two female friends in at any given time and then have my heart absolutely crushed when they got too close and realized I was very odd. And so
I love you. I really do.
And when I first started my practice 11 years ago, I felt like I needed to fit in too, right? Even with my patients, right? And I joke that I would be mortified if there were coffee rings on their lab work, and I wasn't necessarily leaning into what my superpowers are, which is the absolute geeking out on their health topic, and being able to pull that information together for them and communicate. That's my superpower. But yet I felt like I wasn't necessarily leaning in with my full skills, at the risk of seeming, odd. But then I realized that after fully leaning in, right, to my practice and to my women, I am sorry that there are coffee stains on everybody's lab work. That's just how it is. That my patients were getting better, and not just oh, my acne's better, but oh, I left my job that was, dead end, or you know what, I have carved out 3 hours of exercise for myself. And they were starting to actually have benefit beyond this kind of simple reasons that have brought them in the door, right? And it was almost like me showing up in my flaws and everything, the whole package basically was actually giving them permission to do the same, right? And so giving us the permission to even have those conversations in the first place, where I don't think we're facilitating that in most healthcare settings, right? You go in for your one thing, You ask your one question, we give you one piece of paper to solve it, and no one's really asking you how you are or why you want your acne to get better or what your life looks like if you're less fatigued. We're just not creating space for those conversations. But the more that I leaned into that myself, like the better it was for my patients.
Yeah, I know for myself too that when you finally get to experience that raw alignment when someone's like leaning into their power and kind of just owning who they are, there's such comfort and healing in that. It literally is the proverbial permission slip that's being handed out, and I'm in no way surprised that you saw better health outcomes because it was so palpable to them. It's just brilliant. Like I get it.
Well, and it's also way more fun, right?
Way
like,
more.
and it's way more fun to show up as yourself and to feel like you're creating a space where that's the goal, right? Because then those women can put their guard down. And even if they don't share, it's the same idea, right? Like even if they don't share all the things, you're still creating like potential or possibility for those things to start to become accessible to them as things that they would like to see improve in their health. Whereas if we just keep it surface, they never go there, right? They never think big picture about how their kids' rep hockey schedule is destroying their health. They can't even access that as a possibility unless we're all going to like lean in and think differently about our health and how we want to show up and what our purpose is.
Yeah, I just had this visual of like, we don't quite know how accessing community and connection is going to transform, but we know that it does. So that when you have access to that kind of care, how that manifests and shifts in your body is completely unique to you and your experience. But we do know with certainty, and the evidence is super strong here in terms of mortality risk. Like connection is medicine. It is what perpetuates that healing. It's what allows and facilitates the space to be able to do that successfully.
So as far as like what your bigger purpose, right? Like I want to know what your mission is, because I feel like I'm coming into this situation like on its way up, right? I'm an early adopter, right? When I saw you speak, I was like, I'm an early adopter. When I saw you speak, I was like, that's for me. We're going to do that. I want to be the only clinic in Burlington that is providing this space for women. I have a beautiful space for us to do it in person once we can eventually do that. Mm-hmm. And so, but I want to know like what your bigger vision for this is. Like, how can women feel like, because I think that's important for them to know like what their small part is in the bigger picture of what we're trying to create as far as healthcare for women in Canada, but now also in the States. Like, where do you see this going over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I've been privy and witness to the health transformation, and I've seen what this has done for women's lives. And you're right, we can't do this alone. We need to do this as a collective. So every woman who engages in this is literally transforming not only their own healthcare experience, but how women are connecting as a whole, how we are raising our younger generation to think about their bodies, to advocate for their body, to understand and feel empowered by, all of these facets that are deeply feminine and completely unique. And, instead of feeling like that is something that is looked negatively upon, we're celebrating it. And so, with every clinic that launches this, with every woman that engages in this care, we are able to amplify this message and let other women know that there is a different way to do this. So my goal is to amplify and get loud and to be in every possible country that feels the need, and I think everybody does, to serve and show up in this way and help transform this narrative for women. Because, I think when we can take our pain and turn it into our power, if we can own our weird, if we can celebrate quirky, if we can, as a collective, heal and feel supported and nourished, like the world looks radically different. And I was watching a documentary with my husband. I'm like, with animals, it's always the matriarch that keeps the population alive, right? So we need to take care of the women. We need them to know their power.
It's funny. I'll say to women, I'll be like, anemic women will still run the world, right? Like, imagine if they weren't.
Right. Like powerful. They can override a lot of fatigue. Let's be honest. Yeah.
And I love what you said there about the younger generation. I mean, even like I'm, trying to see that in my kids and how we're raising our next generation of girls. My daughter's 8, and she said the other day out of the blue, she was like, I think I'm getting my period. And my son, who's 10, turns to her and he's like, you're not getting your period, Charlie. You're not quite old enough for that yet. And plus you don't even have any boobs. And it was such a moment for me because I was like, first of all, both of my kids know what this is, right? And neither of them saw it as something that was gross or weird. Like my 10-year-old son was very comfortable reminding his 8-year-old sister that she was just a little bit too young and developmentally not quite ready to have her period yet. But listening to like the banter between them talk about this was like so stark opposite to my mom's experience, which was very much the I'm dying and I can't tell anybody about this. And the shame and now we're watching that generation of women transition through menopause and feeling the same discomfort about their bodies and their hormones because they just have missed that whole education process about what normal looks like, what common looks like, and how to lower their tolerance for feeling shitty so that they can actually, like you said, prioritize the pieces of their health that are actually going to help them show up as their best self in their life.
And as you say that, it's like, it is the evolution of getting to the point where when women do reach menopause, it's a celebratory event. It is something that is looked upon as an incredible milestone to get to where, other women look to you for wisdom, where you really lean into your power and able to show up in a much more significant, important way. And that is not the current vocabulary. And there's a lot of, really interesting conversations around age for women. And I really hope to not only transform the younger generation, but really help us lean into like, I made it. I am here. This is amazing. Like I am here to serve. I'm ready. And that will be a wonderful thing to witness as well.
Yeah, I think those women don't even realize when they're in my office and how much I'm benefiting from hearing about their stories of survival, right? And their perseverance and resilience is becoming my survival guide, right? They're there to hear about, how we can use hormones to support them and how we can support their sleep and their incontinence and all that. And yet I'm listening to a 60-year journey of resilience and perseverance and being reminded that like my crappy Tuesday morning trying to get my kids to school in the grand scheme of things, right? Like I can do this because in front of me is this like beautiful, powerful woman who's endured so much joy and pain and has persevered through all of those things. I'm so excited to be able to connect those people together so that sort of collective experience can actually raise each other up. You mentioned the other day when we were chatting about how, if your friend is happy that their friends are benefiting from it. Can you just go through that one, like as we sort of start to wrap up? Because I think the ripple effect here that we can potentially have is just so huge.
The science here is so fascinating. This is the part that just like blows my mind because I think the way the world is, the way that our society functions, we can be quite isolated in thinking that what we're doing isn't influencing anybody else. And so when they've looked at, habits being contagious, what they've found is that there's 3 degrees of influence. And so if your friend's friend, whom you may never meet, if they smoke, if they are obese, if they are happy, if they are depressed, their ability to influence your propensity to those things is huge. So if you have a 3rd generation friend, so a friend's friend who you don't even know their name, you don't know they exist, they might live in Australia, their happiness will raise your happiness by 6%. And when they compared that to an individual getting a raise, that only raised their happiness quota by 2%. So the responsibility of the collective to elevate the vibration, like there's legitimate science to back that up. I mean, we are responsible for how the community functions, the health of the community. And same with depression has the same. I think with every depressed friend that you have, it lowers your happiness scale by 6% each friend. So, we can't deny our interconnectedness and the way our health habits influence others. And I think that's why these groups do so amazing, because when you get 20 women vibrating high together, like that affects how many communities.
Mm-hmm. And in a time like this, just can't even think of how important that is, right? So I was saying, who launches a community health initiative under lockdown? I do, right?
Only the wildest ones, Jordan.
Only the wildest ones. But it's the need for it at this time, actually, even though we're restricted a little bit as far as how we deliver that program, the need for it under this, the current sort of isolation and social distancing and just the general, if we think about the collective mood of the world right now, I can't even think of a better time to give women something where they not only are carving out that time to focus on learning about themselves and learning about their health, but also giving them access to community when they have so many barriers right now to having good community. So I can't even think of a better time to launch a community event or initiative. It was when we're under social lockdown. What are your final thoughts? So the message, you've got the stage or mic. What's your message for women what's the sort of most important thing that you want to share?
Well, I just want to fill in a few things for you that you said there I think are powerful, and I want to highlight. I think one of the longest term side effects of this social distancing is going to be the mental health effects of isolation. And so being able to be part of the solution and provide much needed care during this time is so incredible, and it is going to elevate and lift the vibration and help mitigate the risk of that and the side effects of that. We've been privy to transfer all of our in-person experience into an online space, into a virtual space, and the connection piece has been as solid. So, for anyone who might be having that narrative, they're lucky to be a part of your community, because I know you're going to transfer this in person as soon as you can, but there is no time like the present to engage in this type of care, especially when we're witnessing that the quality of connection is equal. There was some women expressed last night in our Rebel Tribe alumni group how they felt this was essential to their health. So, in an interesting time where that word has become very curious, there are women who are engaged in this who feel like this is imperative to how they are functioning and handling this experience. So I think that is just important to highlight. And if there was anything I could embark to your community of women, is that I'm just so very excited for them to be able to have access of this type of care in your clinic. It's just such an amazing opportunity to be able to have it in a space like yours. And I think I just wish that all women had access to this type of care. And if you don't necessarily have a Rebel Tribe community that you can join, reach out, get online to get off online, go volunteer, do things that help you be socially connected to other people, because we often overcomplicate it. And it could be as simple as sending someone you're thinking of a text, or popping on a Zoom call, or, a FaceTime. And it can really, shift your experience through this time and in life. So, just realize that this is a core human need. It's how we're wired to think. We need to prioritize connection. And when we do that, we not only elevate our health and transform it for ourselves, but we transform it for those around us. Your friend's friend's friend is going to benefit from your engagement. So you're welcome.
Just to reflect on that, at this time too, you and I are in a group, right? And that's when I think about right now. Me, yes, when I think it is my absolute lifeline right now, the connection that we have of, 15 to 20 practitioners, clinic owners, go-getters, wild women, and it's interesting because we're modeling that behavior in our professional group. by having that connection to each other, where we're meeting twice a week or sometimes 3 times a week, and really intimately connected in how each other are doing during this time, which I wouldn't trade like for anything to make it through this. So it's interesting because I think it's easy to imagine that other people seem to be doing it, or their Instagram highlight reel doesn't necessarily show their loneliness, or doesn't show what their back end looks like, right? Like what's going on behind the scenes for those people. But the only way that I can show up and be my best self and be able to deliver the care that I do to my patients is because I have my own tribe of women that I'm connected to behind the scenes that are, cheering me on and sending me the encouraging texts and troubleshooting all of my challenges and all of that with me, which is easy to forget, right? Because we're not always privy to that kind of information, that very likely the successful women you see in your life have that, right? They have that connection of other women who are raising them up, which is why they can be more resilient and they can show up as their best selves.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. I so appreciate, and you have a podcast, which is, from a women's health perspective, is a fantastic resource. How else can people get connected with you or get in contact with you about, all the things that you do?
Yeah. So if you are a practitioner and you want to learn more, you can go on michelleperis.com/freebie, and there's some information there for you. And you can find us over at poppyclinic.com and at Instagram at Dr. Michelle Peris. We'd love to hang out and connect.
Awesome.
And thank you, Jordan.
This is going to be a great ride. I'm so excited for my women to embark on this journey.
I'm very excited for them too. So it's going to be amazing and so symbiotic, right? We get so much value out of it as a facilitator as well. So it's just...
Well, totally. That's and I don't know who it's for more, like them or me, right?
It feels so selfish, but really they leave just as
like I want them to just join my gang, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's pretty much, I think I'm benefiting more. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. We're changing things in women's health. One episode, one topic, one conversation at a time. I want you to feel confident in your health. Please remember that the podcast does not constitute a medical relationship or medical advice. Please talk to your family doctor, your practitioner, your specialist, or anyone on your health team if you think some of the topics we discussed in today's episode apply to you. Take care of yourself. Until next time.